Marry me by morning, or you lose everything. Edmund Carlisle, Duke of Stratton, said it with the cold precision of a man closing a ledger. He stood at the great oak desk of his library, one hand braced against the dark wood, the other holding a single sheet of paper as if it might bite him. His shoulders strained the seams of his deep indigo evening coat. Firelight from the hearth caught the hard line of his jaw, the grey of his eyes, the tight set of a mouth unused to begging. Across from him, Lady Eliza Hawthorne did not move. She had been sitting in the green armchair when he had walked in. She remained sitting now. 26 years old, tall, with auburn hair coming loose from its pins after a long carriage ride, wearing a travelling gown of deep emerald wool. Her gloves were folded in her lap. Her hands were perfectly still. "You are mistaken, Your Grace," she said. Her voice was quiet. "I cannot lose what was never mine to begin with. Your father signed the contract 8 years ago. You were 18. He was alive. The seal is on the bond. The bond names this estate. The bond names you. My father is dead. The contract he signed bound an heiress with the London townhouse and £40,000. That heiress is also dead, Your Grace. What stands before you is a woman who travels with one trunk and one maid, and who has come here at her cousin's insistence to be told, civilly, that the marriage will not take place. It will take place." He set the paper down. He did not look up. "It will take place tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the chapel, by special license already granted. Your dowry will be transferred at noon. By the end of this week, the creditors of Stratton House will be paid in full, and you will be Duchess of Stratton. And if I refuse? Then the whole correspondence between your late father and a certain banker in Bristol will be sent, before this day next, to the editors of 3 London papers. Your name will be linked to a transaction the polite world has not yet heard of. You will leave this house, but you will leave it ruined." Eliza folded her gloves once, neatly, and set them on the small table beside the armchair. "My father is dead, Your Grace. You cannot threaten a corpse." "I am threatening you." The fire snapped. A coal fell forward on the grate, and the sound was the loudest thing in the room. She rose then. She did it slowly, the way a fencer raises a foil. The emerald wool moved with her. She crossed to the desk. She did not stop until the leather edge of it pressed against her hip. "Your Grace," she said, "look at me." He looked. He had no choice. The grey of his eyes was not cold. It was something shut up tight and forbidden to thaw. "You are not a man who blackmails women. I have known of you for 8 years. I have read your speeches in the Lords. I have heard my cousin praise your conduct in the war. Whatever has driven you into this room tonight, it is not the man who wrote those speeches. So either you tell me the truth, the real truth, or you tell me lies, and I leave at dawn, and you go on without me, and we both pretend tonight did not happen." For a moment, something moved behind his face. A muscle, low at the jaw, a breath taken and held. Then it was gone. "My carriage," he said, "will take you to the chapel at 7:30. Your maid has already been informed of the arrangements." "Has she?" "She has." "Then your housekeeper, Your Grace, has been misinformed, because my maid, when last I saw her, was unpacking my trunk." She held his eyes. "Tell her to pack it again. I leave at dawn." He did not answer. She walked to the library door. She paused there, one hand on the frame. The wood was old, the same dark oak as his desk, and her fingers found a knot in it without thinking. Small, smooth, worn down by other hands over 100 years. "Good night, Your Grace." She went out, and she did not look back, and the door closed behind her without a sound. Edmund did not move for a long time. Then he reached, with a hand that was not quite steady, for the decanter on the side table. The brandy caught the firelight as it ran into the glass, a thin, deep amber, the colour of a late October leaf seen through a window. He set the glass down without drinking. The cut crystal made a small, precise sound against the leather blotter. He sat in his own desk chair, and he put both hands over his face. And he sat there in the firelight, like a man who had just lost the only thing he had been waiting on for 8 years. The clock above the mantel ticked. The fire fell softly in on itself. Outside, somewhere on the lake, a single waterbird called once, and was answered by nothing. She did not run up the stairs. She walked them at the pace of a woman who knew that any servant on the upper landing would be watching her face, and that her face must give nothing away. The carpet of the east staircase was a deep, faded crimson, worn pale at the centre by 2 centuries of footfall. Her hand trailed along the polished banister, the wood cool under her palm, the faint smell of beeswax and old smoke rising from the corridor below. A single oil lamp burned on the half landing. The flame in it steadied as she passed, then guttered briefly, then steadied again, as if the house itself were watching her decide. Up the stairs, in the east wing, in a guest chamber smelling faintly of beeswax and applewood, Eliza Hawthorne shut the door of her room and leaned her back against it, and breathed. "My lady?" Her maid, Mary, was a sturdy woman of 40, ginger-haired, currently kneeling by the open trunk. "He has not. Has he?" "Pack it again, Mary." "All of it?" "All of it. We leave at first light." Mary's broad hands did not stop folding the dove-grey morning gown they had been unpacking. "And the wedding?" "There will be no wedding." "My lady," Mary's voice softened. "He sent his housekeeper to me an hour ago. She said the license was already at the chapel. She said I was to lay out the ivory silk for the morning." "He will return the license to the bishop, or he will marry his housekeeper. I do not care." Mary set the dove-grey gown into the trunk. She did not speak. After a moment, she crossed the room, lit the small lamp by the bed, and began folding shawls. Eliza pushed off the door. Her hands were trembling, finally. She had not allowed them to tremble downstairs. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The grounds of Stratton House lay in late October dark. The long avenue of oaks, their last leaves falling in slow drifts onto the gravel. The lamps lit at the gate, a thin mist rising off the lake. It was beautiful. Of course, it was beautiful. He had inherited a beautiful house. He had inherited debts. He had a duty to his tenants and his name and the 700 souls who depended on Stratton. And he had decided tonight, apparently, that her dowry was the only rope long enough to reach. She let the curtain fall. "Mary." "My lady." Why is he doing it like this? Mary, who had been with her since she was 12, paused with a folded shawl in her hands. "Like what, my lady?" "Like a thug. He is not a thug. I have read every word he has ever written for the public press. He spoke against the press gangs in 14. He sponsored the orphan school at Wickham. He nursed his uncle through 3 months of failing health, and never once let it be said publicly that the old man had—" She stopped. That the old man was difficult. He is not a man who blackmails. "And yet, my lady." "And yet." Eliza sat down on the edge of the bed. She pressed her palms flat against the coverlet. The fabric was a Persian print in burnt gold and indigo, and her fingers traced the loops of it without seeing them. "He has been in this house 30 hours, Mary. We arrived yesterday. I have seen him at dinner once, and now in the library once. He has not said one word out of order at the table. He passed the salt to my cousin Harriet with the manners of a curate. And then tonight, alone in a room, he tells me my father's name will be in the papers if I do not stand at an altar in the morning. It does not match. It does not match anything I have ever heard about him. I can blackmail just as well as he can. I can leave this house and tell every drawing room in London that the Duke of Stratton tried to coerce a guest under his own roof. He must know that. He is not a fool." Mary considered. She set the shawl down. She came and sat carefully on the chair opposite the bed. "My lady, may I speak as I should not?" "Always." "There was something at the kitchen passage when we came in yesterday. The old housekeeper, Mrs. Arden, She has been here 40 years. She was crying. Quietly, but crying. I asked her what had happened. She said, "Nothing has happened, child. Nothing yet." And she went away. Crying about what? I do not know. But Mrs. Arden does not cry. Eliza did not move. She did not move for a long time. "Pack the trunk, Mary," she said at last. "Pack it carefully. We leave at dawn." "Yes, my lady." "And put my mother's pearls in the velvet pouch, not the box. The box rattles." "Yes, my lady." Mary rose and went back to her work. After a few minutes, Eliza got up too, and crossed to the writing desk by the window and lit the candle there. She took out a sheet of paper. She dipped the pen. She did not write. She sat with the pen above the page and watched the candle flame breathe, and tried to make herself certain. Downstairs, in the library, Edmund had not moved. The clock on the mantel struck 11. A soft knock came at the door. He did not answer. The door opened anyway. A woman of perhaps 30 came in, small, dark-haired, in a riding habit of midnight blue, holding a riding crop she had clearly not had time to put down. His sister, Lady Hannah Carlyle. "Edmund?" He did not look up. "Edmund, what have you done?" "Go to bed, Hannah." "Mrs. Arden told me about the license." She crossed the room. She stopped at the desk. She set the riding crop on it with a small, deliberate sound. "Mrs. Arden told me what you sent your secretary into Salisbury for at 5 o'clock this evening. Mrs. Arden told me the bishop's clerk delivered it at 9. Edmund, look at me." He looked. "You were going to marry that woman tomorrow, without telling her why." "I told her why." "You told her about the contract. You told her about the debt. You told her about the papers in Bristol. Did you tell her about the letter from Ashbourne?" He did not answer. "Did you tell her?" Hannah said, very softly, "that 2 days ago Lord Ashbourne wrote to her uncle and offered for her hand?" "No." "Did you tell her what you know about Lord Ashbourne? About the first wife? About the second?" "No." "Edmund, you stupid, prideful, self-flagellating fool. She is upstairs packing. Mary has just sent Janet down to the kitchen for hot water. She is going to leave at dawn, and Ashbourne's offer will reach her uncle's house before her, and her uncle will accept it because Ashbourne has 30,000 a year and a clean name, and you will sit in this room for the rest of your life knowing that you could have stopped it and chose instead to be a coward. I did not want her to come to me out of pity. So you came to her with threats. Edmund, that is worse. That is worse than pity. You have made her hate you, when all you needed to do—" "All I needed to do," he said, and his voice broke for the first time since their father's funeral, "was tell her, after 8 years, that I have not been able to stop thinking of her. That every speech I have written in the Lords, I have written in some half-conscious hope she would read it. That I kept her father's last letter to me in the second drawer of this desk, because she was the only one who knew that he was kind. And I could not tell her, Hannah, because I could not bear to watch her face when she realized I was a man asking for a dowry first and a wife second. So I made it worse. I made it the worst it could be. I made her despise me before she could pity me. And now I cannot. Hannah, I cannot. Tell her now. It is past 11. She is not. She will not see me. Then tell her at dawn. Stand at her door. Beg, Edmund. Stratton men do not beg. Be the first one. It is overdue." Hannah picked up her riding crop. She crossed to the door. She paused there. Mrs. Arden was crying because she knew. She is known for 2 years. She watches you read the London papers when Eliza Hawthorne has written a letter to the editor about the orphan school, and she watches you fold the paper afterwards, as if it were a religious thing. The whole house has known for 2 years, Edmund. The whole house, except the woman herself. She left. Edmund sat alone. He looked down at the paper on his desk, the one he had been holding when he had told Eliza she would lose everything. It was not the contract. The contract was in the safe. The paper on his desk was a list, in his own hand, of every reason he had once written down for marrying her, and every reason he had crossed out. There were 19 reasons. 18 of them were crossed out. The last one was not. The last one read, "Because she is the only person I have ever wanted to grow old with." He put his head down on his arms. The fire burned down. 2 hours later, in the Upper East Wing, Eliza had still not undressed. She sat in the green wool, in the chair by the window, with her mother's pearls in her lap and the unwritten letter on the desk. The pearls were warm. They had been against her throat all day, and now they were against her palm, a small, steady warmth like a cat's belly. She rolled them between her fingers without seeing them. Mary had finally fallen asleep in the truckle bed, snoring softly, one work-roughened hand curled under her cheek. Outside, the mist had thickened over the lake. The lamps at the gate burned in the murk like two distant, drowsy eyes. A barn owl crossed the line of the avenue, white against black, and was gone. The fire in the small grate had been let to fall to coals, and the coals had gone to a deep, breathing red, and the room was warmer than it should have been at 3 in the morning. And that warmth was, somehow, the most disorienting thing in the world. She had come here to refuse a man. The room had welcomed her anyway. There was a tap at the door. Light. Almost not there. Eliza rose. She went to the door. She opened it a finger's width. It was Mrs. Arden, the old housekeeper. 60 years old, neat in a black dress, holding a candle in one hand and a book in the other. "My lady, I beg your pardon for the hour. I will not keep you. I know you leave at dawn." "Mrs. Arden, what?" "This belongs to His Grace. I have no business bringing it to you. I would have lost my place by morning, and I will deserve to. But I have served 4 Carlyles, my lady, and I will not see this one ruin himself out of pride." She held out the book. "It is the second drawer of his desk. I took it from there an hour ago when he was downstairs in the south study. He keeps it locked, but I have a key. Read it or do not read it. Then leave at dawn or do not. I will not ask you again." Eliza took the book. It was a battered ledger, leather-bound, with a strip of green ribbon for a marker. "Mrs. Arden, why?" "Because, my lady, I have never seen a man more unfit to argue for himself than the Duke of Stratton. Good night." The old woman went away down the dark corridor with her candle. Eliza closed the door. She set the book on the desk. She lit the second candle. She sat down. She opened the book at the green ribbon. It was a private journal. Not a diary of his days, a commonplace book. The kind a careful man kept of things worth remembering. The pages on either side of the ribbon were dense with his handwriting. The first thing she saw was the date. October the 17th, 2 years past. The second thing she saw was her name. She read. She read for a long time. The candle at her elbow burnt down to its second mark. Outside, the mist over the lake thickened and went pale, and thinned again, and a single late owl called once from the homewood, and then was silent. Somewhere beneath her, in the depths of the house, a door opened and closed and opened and closed, in the soft cadence of Mrs. Arden moving from kitchen to pantry to kitchen, and the small, ordinary sound of it was the only thing that kept the room she sat in from feeling, entirely, like a room outside time. Eliza turned the pages slowly. She did not skip ahead. She did not skin. She read about a young woman seen at an Easter service in Hampshire 2.5 years before, and how the man writing the entry had not been able to think of anything else for 4 days afterwards. She read his transcription, in his own hand, of a letter she had written to the Times about the conditions in the workhouses at Wickham, a letter he had cut out and pasted into the book. She read his careful, terrible analysis of his own situation. that he had inherited debts he had not told his sister about, that he had inherited a dowry contract with a name he could not bring himself to claim by force, that he had decided long ago to release her from the contract the moment she came of age, in possession of her own fortune, and that he had failed to release her only because he had been waiting, coward that he was, for her own father's death, so that he could pretend the contract had lapsed naturally, rather than admit he had wanted to keep it. She read about Lord Ashbourne. She read 3 pages about Lord Ashbourne, in the Duke of Stratton's controlled, furious hand. About a first wife who had died. The entry used a phrase too careful to repeat. Under conditions the household servants had been paid to forget. About a second wife, who had simply stopped appearing at her own dinner table. About letters and witnesses, and a magistrate in Cheshire who had been bought, and a coroner who had been moved. She read about a letter, 2 days old, in which Lord Ashbourne had offered, with great formality, for the hand of Lady Eliza Hawthorne. She read the entry that came after that one. It was very short. It was 3 sentences. I have until tomorrow morning. I cannot say what I should say. I will say what I must. She closed the book very slowly. The leather creaked under her hand. The green ribbon brushed her wrist as she let the cover down. She kept her palm on the cover for a long moment, the way one keeps a hand on a door that has just been shut against a storm. The book was warm where she had been reading it. The desk under it was cold. The candle had burned an inch. The mist outside the window had thickened. Mary, on the truckle bed, turned in her sleep and murmured something, and was still. Eliza put both hands flat on the book. She stayed that way for a long time, then she rose, and she crossed the room, and she shook Mary gently by the shoulder. "Mary! Mary, wake up!" "My lady." Mary blinked, instantly alert in the way of a woman who had nursed babies. "What hour is it? Have we missed dawn?" "Not yet. Mary, listen carefully. The trunk. Leave it packed. But I want you to take down the dove grey from the top of it, and the lavender shawl, and the black travelling boots. Set them out by the door. And then, Mary, I need you to fetch the dove grey." She paused. She was thinking faster than she could speak. "No. I need you to go and find Mrs. Arden. Quietly. She will not be sleeping. Tell her Lady Eliza thanks her for the loan of the book, and asks if there is hot tea anywhere in this house at 3 in the morning. "Hot tea, my lady." "Hot tea. And tell Mrs. Arden, Mary, tell her exactly this. Do not soften it. Tell her that the Duke of Stratton may come to my door at dawn if he wishes, and I will be awake to receive him. But if he comes before dawn, I will not open it. He will wait for the hour. He has earned the wait. Do you understand?" "Yes, my lady." "Go." Mary went. Eliza sat down at the desk. She drew a fresh sheet of paper. She dipped the pen. She wrote. She did not write to her cousin. She did not write to her uncle. She wrote to the Duke of Stratton, and what she wrote was 3 lines long. "You should have told me. You will tell me now. At dawn, and not before." She folded the paper. She sealed it with the candle wax and her mother's signet, a small swallow, wings raised. She set it on the desk where the morning sun, when it came, would touch it. Then she sat in the green chair by the window and watched the mist over the lake and waited for the world to come back. Downstairs, half an hour later, Edmund was in the small study off the south corridor, where he had gone because he could not bear the library any longer, and Mrs. Arden found him there. She did not speak. She simply set a folded sheet of paper on the table at his elbow and went away again. The paper bore the impression of a small swallow with raised wings. He read it 3 times. Then he sat very still, and he understood, finally, exactly what she was offering him. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a hearing. A door that was still closed, but no longer locked. He rose. He went to his own dressing room. He washed his face. He did not change his coat. There was no time, and to change would have been to perform. He sent his valet, who had been waiting up, to bed. Then he went and stood at the long window of the upper hall and watched the eastern sky. It took an hour. It took the worst hour of his life. The mist over the lake did not lift quickly. It thinned at the surface first, peeled back in long, pale ribbons, and then settled lower onto the dark water. The oaks of the avenue stood in it to their knees. A barn cat, the great striped one his mother had named in childhood, and that nobody had quite remembered to rename for 30 years, crossed the gravel below the window with the tail-up self-importance of an animal who had business and would not be questioned about it. From the kitchens, 2 stories down, came the first dim sounds of a house being woken by its housekeeper rather than its master. The low ring of a copper pot set on iron, the scrape of a hearth being raked, the small percussive cough of the old range coming back to life. He listened to all of it without hearing any of it. He smelled, faintly, the bread Mrs. Arden had set the night before to rise. She had not stopped baking, even tonight. The ordinary, dogged life of Stratton House went on under his feet, whether he deserved it or not, and the realization of that was, in some way he could not yet name, the thing that finally allowed him to breathe. The mist cleared. The first thread of grey appeared above the line of the oaks. When it did, he walked, slowly, with the paper folded in the breast of his coat, to the door of the east guest chamber. He raised his hand. He hesitated. He had hesitated for 2.5 years. He had hesitated for 3 weeks since Ashbourne's letter. He had hesitated for 30 hours since she had come into his house. He could not hesitate now. He knocked. The door opened almost at once. Eliza Hawthorne stood there in the dove-grey morning gown, her hair pinned up, her eyes very awake. She had been crying, perhaps, and had washed her face. She did not say anything. She stood aside. He came in. The room smelled faintly of beeswax and tea. There was a cup of it, half drunk, on the desk. Mary was nowhere to be seen. The trunk was strapped and waiting at the foot of the bed. He stopped in the middle of the carpet. He did not sit. He did not approach her. He stood at a careful distance, hands open at his sides, the way a man stands when he means to give a sword to someone who may or may not use it on him. "Lady Hawthorne," he said, "I have come to ask you to stay." "To marry you?" "To stay. The marriage I will not ask for tonight. The contract I will tear up before noon, if you will let me. Your dowry I will not touch. The papers in Bristol I burned in this fireplace at 4 o'clock this morning. Mrs. Arden will confirm it. And there is no other copy, and there will not be." "Then what do you want, Your Grace?" "I want you," he said, "to know that I love you." The words came out unhurried. He had practiced them, perhaps, walking the long upper hall in the dark. Or perhaps he had simply waited so long to say them that they had worn themselves smooth. "And I want you to know that I have loved you for 2.5 years. And I want you to know that if you go this morning, I will not pursue you. I will not write to you. I will not stand in your way. I will not do you the injury of forcing my heart on a woman who has every right to leave this house without ever looking back. But I cannot let you go without telling you that. It is owed. It has been owed for a long time." "And Lord Ashburn, Your Grace?" He flinched. He had not expected her to know that name. He looked, for 1/2 second, at the book on her desk and the green ribbon at its edge, and he understood. "Lord Ashburn," he said, "will not have you, regardless of what you decide about me. If you leave at dawn, I will be in your uncle's drawing room by tomorrow evening with the magistrate's records from Cheshire and a list of witnesses. I will buy you out of that engagement at any cost. I will do that for you, whether or not you ever speak to me again. That is not a condition. That is simply what I will do." "Why?" "Because I love you." "Even if I leave?" "Even if you leave." The silence, then, was the longest silence of either of their lives. The room was very still. The first sun was beginning to come over the oaks, and a thin pink light moved along the edge of the carpet and crept up the side of the bed. Eliza did not speak for a long time. Then she did. "Your Grace, you are a fool." "Yes. You are the worst kind of fool. The kind that thinks suffering is the same as virtue. The kind that cannot bear to ask for what he wants, so blackmails for it instead. The kind that will burn his own hand off rather than let a woman see he is bleeding. Yes. My father liked you." He looked up. "My father liked you very much. He told me so when he signed the contract. He said, 'The boy is too proud, but the pride is the kind that comes from never having been allowed to be afraid. He will frighten her at first. Be patient with him. He is worth it.'" She paused. "He died before he could tell me whether you had grown out of it." "Eliza, you have not." "No. But you have," she said, "burned the papers in Bristol. And you have burned them before knowing what I would say. And you have stood in this room and offered me Lord Ashbourne's defeat as a free gift, with no claim attached. Edmund," the first time she had used his name, "you do not know what to do with a woman who is willing to be loved. You only know what to do with one who must be coerced. I am not willing to be coerced, but I have been for some time, and against my own better judgment, willing to be loved." He closed his eyes. "For how long?" he said. "Since your speech in the Lords on the press gangs. I wrote to you once. I tore the letter up. I tore one up to you, about the orphan school. I know, Mrs. Arden told me. Mrs. Arden is going to be sacked. Mrs. Arden is going to be the godmother of our first child. I am setting that as a condition." He laughed. He did not know he was going to laugh until it was already happening. It came out of him, cracked and rusty and astonished. "What are the other conditions, my lady?" She took her time before she answered. She crossed the small distance to the writing desk and laid one hand flat on the leather-bound book. Her fingers were steady now, in a way they had not been at midnight. The dawn light, climbing the wall behind her, caught the small gold swallow on the seal of the paper she had written him, and the bird seemed for a moment to lift. "There will be 4. Mrs. Arden, godmother. Lord Ashburn, finished by your hand before the end of this week. I want him at the magistrate, not merely silenced. The dowry, kept in my own name and at my own discretion. Half of it directed to the orphan school at Wickham. And, Edmund, you will never again, in our marriage, threaten me with anything. Not a paper, not a creditor, not a public scandal. If you have something to ask of me, you will ask. If you have something to fear, you will tell me. If you cannot bear to speak it, you will write it. You will not, ever again, walk into a room with my name in your hand and treat me as a problem to be cornered. Yes. Say it properly. I will not, ever again, treat you as a problem to be cornered. I swear it on my father's name, and on yours, and on the swallow on your seal. That last one binds you the hardest. Good. She crossed the room to him then. She stopped a foot from him. She did not yet touch him. She looked up. He was tall, but she was tall too, and the look between them was almost level. "Adrian," she said. And then she shook her head, because that had been the name of his father, and she had got it wrong from sheer exhaustion. "Edmund, I beg your pardon. Edmund. I will stay." "Eliza. Not by special license. Not at 8 o'clock. I want the banns called. I want 3 weeks. I want my uncle informed, and Hannah's permission asked, and Mrs. Arden's bread baked for the breakfast. I want it done properly, in this chapel, in front of the 700 souls of this estate." "Yes." "And I want you, this morning, to send the bishop's clerk back to Salisbury, with the special license and a personal note of apology, because it is bad form to take up a bishop's hours for nothing. Yes. And I want, she said, and now her voice was no longer steady, to be held. Just for a moment. I have not slept. I have not eaten since yesterday's nuncheon. I read your terrible book, and I have spent 3 hours hating you and loving you in alternation, and I am very tired. Edmund. He took her in his arms. He did it carefully, as if she might shatter. She did not shatter. She put her forehead against his shoulder, and he felt her shoulders go down, and his coat smelled of wood smoke and the cold of the south corridor, and a faint, faint thread of bergamot from the cologne his valet kept setting out. And Eliza Hawthorne breathed in once, deeply, and laughed. A small, wet, astonished laugh. You are trembling, she said into his coat. Yes. Stratton men do not tremble. This one does. Good. The sun came up properly then, all at once, the way an October sun does when the mist finally lifts. Yellow light came in the east window, and crossed the floor, and reached the trunk, and lit the dove-grey gown and the lavender shawl. And Eliza Hawthorne, in her tall, tired, emerald after emerald after emerald composure. And it lit Edmund Carlyle's coat, and his bowed head, and the place where her cheek rested against his shoulder. And somewhere downstairs, Mrs. Arden, who had been listening at the bottom of the staircase, allowed herself the smallest, driest smile of her 60 years. For a long, bright moment, neither of them moved. The window was open a finger's width. Mary had insisted, before going down to the kitchen, that the room be aired, and a thin draught of October air came in over the sill, smelling of frost on long grass, and the cold damp of fallen oak leaves. From the avenue below came the slow sound of gravel under the boots of a man walking a dog. The dog, somewhere out of sight, gave one short, contented bark, and then made no further sound. Above, in the rookery at the edge of the home wood, 2 birds spoke briefly to each other, and were quiet again. The world was wholly unconcerned with the small, immense thing that had just been done in the east guest chamber of Stratton House. The world went on. Edmund had always loved that about the country. He loved it more now, with this woman tucked against his coat, as if she had been built to fit there. The wedding took place 3 weeks later. The banns were called on the 3 Sundays before. Hannah arranged the flowers, late chrysanthemums and the last of the autumn roses, banked along the chapel windowsills in pewter jugs that had not been used since the last Duchess's churching 40 years earlier. Mary cried twice during the rehearsal, both times because the rector pronounced Hawthorne wrong, and Mary considered it a personal slight. Mrs. Arden was, in fact, named godmother of the first child the following spring. She accepted the office with the impassive dignity of a woman who had known, all along, that this was how it would end, and made no comment beyond a small, dry observation about the weight of the christening robe. The 700 souls of Stratton came, as Eliza had asked. The chapel was full. The lane outside it was full, lined 2 deep with tenants in their best wool. The kitchen gardens of the great house were full, the breakfast laid out under canvas, with 3 long trestle tables of oak set on the gravel walks, and the smell of new bread and roasted apples and warm spiced cider carried halfway down the South Avenue. Lord Ashburn was, as promised, finished by Edmund's hand within the week. The magistrate's records arrived. The witnesses were heard. Ashburn's name went into the papers without any of Edmund's ever being attached to the story, because Edmund did not require credit, only justice. The first of his second wife's relatives wrote a letter of thanks. Edmund did not answer it, because he did not believe thanks were owed for a thing he should have done 2 years before. The dowry was kept, at Eliza's discretion, in her own name. Half of it was directed to the orphan school at Wickham within the first month. The school's matron, a sharp woman of 54, came in person to deliver her thanks and stayed 2 days and inspected the kitchens of Stratton and pronounced the bread acceptable, the soup adequate, and the new Duchess, "The only one of you with a head for figures, Your Grace, no offence." Edmund took no offence. The orphan school's matron stayed 2 days, as already mentioned, and on the morning of her departure, she stood for some time at the long window of the Stratton Library and looked out over the avenue of oaks. The leaves were down by then, and the gravel walk had been swept of them, and the rooks were going about their late autumn business, with the rancorous satisfaction of birds who had survived another harvest. The matron, who was not a sentimental woman, had nevertheless been given the freedom of the great house for 2 nights, and had observed certain small things she did not, in the end, comment upon. The way the Duke's hand brushed the small of his wife's back as they passed in a doorway. The way the Duchess looked up from her book whenever a step came into the room and was not the right one, and went calmly back to her book. The way a battered leather ledger with a green ribbon now sat openly on the writing desk in the morning room, a pen and inkwell beside it, as if it had become a thing the household read together, and not against one another. In the spring, on a morning very like the morning Eliza had first read the journal, she came down to breakfast in a primrose yellow gown, found her husband at the window with the London papers, and laid a small object on the table beside his cup. It was a battered leather ledger with a green ribbon for a marker. "I am giving this back to you," she said. "I have read it a sufficient number of times. Mrs. Arden wishes it returned to its drawer." "And the entries," he said, "since." "You will write them. I will read them. I will not need them as evidence again. But I would like them, sometimes, for evidence of joy." He took the book. He turned it once in his hands. The leather was worn smooth where his thumb had rubbed it for 2 years before she had ever opened it, and the green ribbon had been replaced. The new one was a paler, fresher silk than the original, and Eliza had chosen it deliberately, that morning, from the spool in her sewing box. He set the book on the windowsill, where the spring sun could reach it. He drew her down into the chair beside him. The orchard outside the long window was in white blossom. 2 of the gardener's children were playing among the apple trees, laughing in a way that carried in through the open glass. A swallow, the first of the season, cut across the light and was gone. "I love you," he said. "On the record." "On the record." She picked up the ledger. She handed him the pen. He wrote. In the second drawer of his desk, the journal of the Duke of Stratton continued, one careful entry at a time, for the rest of his life. Most of the entries, after that morning, were 1 line long. The first line of every page, for 40 years, was the same. "Today, also, my wife." If you have ever waited too long to say a thing because you were afraid of being seen, and then said it anyway, and discovered the other person was waiting for you, leave a comment and tell me what you said and how it landed. I read every one. And if a story by the fire is the kind of evening you keep coming back to, the bell on this channel will keep them coming. Pull the chair a little closer next time. The fire is better with company.